The rain had just stopped, leaving behind a glistening sheen on the pavement outside Halston Dynamics, a massive engineering firm that spanned an entire city block. The towering glass building shimmered under the early morning sun, but beneath it, 3 levels underground, was a quiet world of grease-stained floors, humming fluorescents, and the scent of oil, steel, and silence. In this subterranean garage, tucked between rows of unfinished prototypes and forgotten machines, a solitary figure moved with quiet precision. Her name was Clara Hart. She was 27, shy to the point of being invisible, and she wore oversized coveralls with her name patch stitched in crooked red letters. She didn't speak unless spoken to, and even then, her words barely carried. Most people didn't know she existed. Those who did called her the quiet one with the wrench. Clara hadn't been hired for her credentials. She had none. She'd once studied mechanical systems at a community college but never finished due to family circumstances. Instead, she'd learned from the world itself, fixing broken-down tractors on her father's failing farm, restoring rusted motors from junkyards, and spending hours reading engineering manuals that others had tossed away. She knew machines better than she knew people. No one really noticed her. That was fine with her. She didn't seek attention. She preferred the quiet of engines over the noise of meetings and corporate jargon. But everything changed on a Thursday morning. The garage had been unusually tense that week. Whispers floated down from upper levels, something about a multi-billion-dollar project, a prototype that wouldn't start, a deadline that couldn't be missed. Clara kept her head down, continued sorting spare parts, and minded her own work. But on that particular morning, a young engineer named Devin burst into the garage, frantic and red-faced. "Is anyone here? Anyone who knows the V6 ALT prototype layout?" No one responded. Most of the team was upstairs or off-site. Devin spotted Clara. He frowned, not even sure if she was an intern or a custodian. Do you know engines?" She looked up, her hazel eyes calm and steady. "Some." He hesitated, then sighed. "It doesn't matter. Just follow me." She followed him, not because she expected to help, but because he looked desperate and she couldn't stand seeing a machine struggle. Upstairs, in the innovation lab, a space she'd never been allowed in, she saw it. The V6 ILT was supposed to be the company's future. A self-regulating, eco-efficient engine that could adjust in real time to environmental conditions. Designed to power everything from military drones to emergency response vehicles, it was the kind of machine that could change lives, but right now it sat dead and silent, surrounded by a crowd of engineers who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Clara stood awkwardly near the door. No one noticed her at first. Then someone scoffed. "Who's she? This isn't a playground." Devin muttered, "She works in the garage, she might know something." A woman in a blazer, someone high-ranking, glared. "We don't have time for guesses, we've tried everything." Clara stepped forward quietly, eyes fixed on the engine. It was beautiful, but something about the tension between the housing units felt off. She didn't have access to the computer readouts, didn't need them. She just listened. It wasn't the power supply, not the sensors. It was something more subtle, the kind of misalignment that only someone who had built machines with their own hands could feel. She asked softly, "Has anyone checked the magnetic timing synchronizers?" The room fell quiet. Someone said, "We ran diagnostics on all timing systems." Clara knelt beside the engine, not touching anything. Not the diagnostics, the actual resonance. Sometimes they sync in code, but not in flow. Confused silence. The CEO himself, Miles Everhart, a stern, silver-haired man with eyes like cold glass, stood in the corner, arms crossed. He'd been watching for nearly an hour. "Let her try," he said suddenly. The team stared at him. He repeated, "Give her 5 minutes." Reluctantly, they stepped back. Clara moved slowly, gently. She didn't rush. She closed her eyes, tilted her head, and touched the casing like she was listening to a heartbeat. Then she reached into the lower unit with a small tool from her own pocket. A flick of adjustment. A micro-calibration. She stood. "Try it now," she whispered. They did. The engine came to life, not with a roar but a soft, perfect purr. Not too loud, not too weak, just right. The room fell into stunned silence. Devon mouthed, "No way." The lead engineer blinked, unable to speak. Miles Everhart took a step forward, his eyes still on the engine. "What's your name?" Clara hesitated. "Clara Hart, sir." He nodded once, slowly. "You're not supposed to be here, but thank you for being here anyway." She didn't know what to say. She just nodded and backed away. No applause, no handshake. She returned to the garage, to her world of quiet tools and old engines, unsure if anything would come of it. But the next morning, everything changed. At exactly 8 a.m., a sleek black car pulled up to the service entrance. A man in a tailored suit stepped out holding a letter. "Clara Hart?" he asked. She nodded, surprised. He handed her the envelope. It had the company's seal. Inside was a simple note. "Meet me at the executive level. Today, 10 a.m. Emmy, the garage, her familiar shelter, suddenly felt distant. Something was shifting, and Clara had no idea what was waiting for her above the ground she'd always stayed beneath. The elevator climbed slowly, each ding sounding louder than the last in Clara's ears. She clutched the letter tightly in her hand, her knuckles pale from the grip. The executive floor wasn't just another level. It was a different world, one she had never imagined entering, much less being summoned to. Her boots, still dusted, with garage grit, felt out of place on the polished marble tiles as she stepped out. The hallway was silent and pristine. Modern art lined the walls, and soft instrumental music drifted through hidden speakers. A receptionist with perfect posture and a warm but rehearsed smile greeted her. "You must be Clara Hart. Mr. Everhart is expecting you." She was guided into a long conference room. It was empty except for Miles Everhart at the far end, seated beside a massive window that overlooked the entire city. He didn't stand when she entered, but his gaze rose from a file on the table. He studied her with the same intensity one might use to examine a blueprint for a machine they'd never seen before. Clara took a deep breath, quietly wishing she could disappear. "You made quite an impression yesterday," he began, tapping the folder in front of him. "This contains a report on the V6 ALT engine failure. The part you fixed? None of our diagnostics picked it up. Not one." She didn't know what to say. "It was off. I just listened." "That's the part no one teaches," he said. "The listening." He stood, slowly walking over to her. "You've worked here 3 years. No complaints, no recognition. Most people in this building don't even know you exist." Clara looked down. "That's okay." "No," he said firmly. "It's not. I can't afford to overlook people like you anymore." He walked back to his desk and slid a small dark blue access badge across the table toward her. "This is for the Innovation Lab. Full clearance. Starting today, you're part of the Special Projects Unit. Your assignment starts immediately." Clara stared at the badge, unsure if this was a dream. "Why me?" "Because you did in minutes what others couldn't in days, and you didn't need recognition to do it. That kind of clarity, it's rare." She reached for the badge slowly, her fingers trembling. "But I don't have a degree. I never even—" He cut her off. "Degrees can't measure instinct. Some of the best minds I've ever known never had a diploma." She didn't argue, she couldn't. It felt like a door had opened into a world she was never supposed to see. Yet here she was. By noon, Clara was walking through the Innovation Lab again, only this time not as a visitor or background worker, but as a team member. People who had brushed past her days ago were now giving her sidelong glances, whispers trailing behind her steps. At her new station, a sleek project tablet awaited her. She sat in silence, absorbing it all. She still felt like an outsider, like a misplaced part in a well-oiled machine. But the engine she'd fixed still purred quietly in the background, reminding her she'd earned her place. Across the lab, Rachel Vega, one of the senior engineers, approached. Clara tensed. Rachel had been in the room the day before, one of the ones who had doubted her. Rachel didn't smile, but her tone was more respectful now. That thing you did yesterday? With the resonance? I didn't even think to check that. You were right. Clara nodded, unsure how to respond. If you ever want to walk me through how you saw it, I'd appreciate it. Clara blinked. She hadn't expected that. Later that week, the CEO introduced Clara during a team strategy session. He didn't announce her as a mechanic. He called her one of the finest technical instincts in this company. The room had been silent, uncertain, but he'd meant every word. Still, not everyone was happy. There were whispers, rumors. Some said she got lucky. Others said it was favoritism. One engineer, Eli Brenner, was especially cold, a towering figure with a resume filled with awards and international patents. He made a point of never speaking to Clara, never acknowledging her ideas. He was well-liked, polished, and powerful, and he didn't like that someone without credentials had solved a problem he hadn't. One evening, Clara stayed late, poring over a blueprint for a modular energy unit. It had a flaw no one else seemed to notice, a cascading fault in its thermal regulation that could lead to dangerous overheating. She redrew the diagram, adjusted the flow vectors, and submitted it to the team folder with a quiet note. Recommend redesign of Unit 4, potential safety concern. The next morning, the design was updated, but her name had been removed. Clara said, "Nothing." But Miles Everhart noticed. He called her into his office. "I saw the timestamp. I know you submitted the change." She looked down again. "It's fine, as long as it's fixed." "It's not fine," he said sharply. "We don't erase people here, not anymore." That afternoon, he sent out a company-wide memo acknowledging Clara's contribution. The message was short, but it sent shockwaves through the building. It didn't just validate her work, it put her on the radar. Some people cheered, others bristled. Back in the garage, her old coworkers watched the memo roll across their monitors in awe. One of them, Manny, whispered, "Clara? She's in the CEO's emails now?" Another chuckled. Guess she wasn't just the quiet one with the wrench after all. But even as Clara stepped into her new role, with new respect and a seat at the table, she couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was coming. Her instinct, a quiet humming thing that had always guided her, told her this was just the beginning. Some engines take time to warm up, and Clara Hart was just getting started. The storm hit just as Clara was leaving the lab. Rain pelted the windows like 1,000 quiet voices warning of something unseen. She hesitated in the doorway, badge clipped to her shirt, mind still running calculations from the prototype she'd just spent 8 hours troubleshooting. But something else was bothering her, something she couldn't quite name. As thunder cracked above the city, Clara ducked into the elevator, clutching her satchel close. She didn't know that just 3 floors above her, a meeting was unfolding that would determine the course of her future. In the executive conference room, Miles Everhart stood at the head of a long table surrounded by his inner circle, department, heads, project leaders, legal advisors. On the screen behind him flickered a single word, Oasis. "Oasis is our future," he said. "It's not just a power system. It's a fully adaptive, AI-integrated engine capable of sustaining entire emergency networks in off-grid zones, medical, search and rescue, disaster relief. We finish it, we don't just lead the industry, we save lives." A few executives nodded, others shifted in their seats. Miles continued. "But there's a problem. We're stuck. The core algorithms, predictive modeling is unstable, and every time we simulate full integration, it breaks." Eli Brenner leaned forward, fingers steepled. "And you want to hand that to a mechanic?" Miles's jaw tightened. "Clara isn't just a mechanic. She's not even a graduate," Eli pressed. "We have engineers with 15 years of AI-integrated systems who can't solve this. What makes her so special?" Miles clicked a remote. The screen changed to show the diagnostics log of the engine Clara fixed, the impossible one. 7 minutes, he said quietly. "That's what makes her special." The room fell silent. Downstairs, Clara was unaware that her name had just been spoken in a room she'd never dared to imagine entering. But as she stepped into the rain and pulled her hood over her head, her phone buzzed. New message. Unknown number. Clara. Tomorrow. 6 a.m. East Annex Lab. Bring only what you trust. M.E. She read it twice, the last 3 words echoing louder than thunder. Bring only what you trust. The next morning, while the city still slept, Clara walked into the East Annex, an old wing of the building she'd never been inside. It smelled like dust and time. Inside, the lights buzzed reluctantly to life, revealing a massive engine surrounded by open panels, scattered notes, and half-finished simulations. On the wall, a single phrase was handwritten in marker. If they don't believe in you, build it anyway. Miles was waiting with 2 people Clara had never seen before. One, a wiry man with sharp glasses and ink-stained fingers. The other, a tall woman who radiated calm intelligence. This is Dr. Cade and Dr. Mira, Miles said. They're not from our company. They're independent thinkers, like you. Cade smiled. We've heard a lot about you, Clara. We're here to help build the core of Oasis, and we need your intuition. Mira added, the issue isn't technical, it's philosophical. The system isn't failing because the code is wrong. It's failing because the logic is linear. Life isn't linear. Clara stared at the humming machine. It looked more like a puzzle than a prototype. I don't code, she said softly. Miles shrugged. You don't have to. Just listen. She stepped closer, her palms almost unconsciously resting against the frame. The vibration under her skin told her what no graph ever could. The system was conflicted. It was reacting, not responding. It couldn't adjust because it didn't trust the change. She turned to them. The inputs are fighting each other, like the system doesn't know what it's allowed to prioritize. Cade blinked. That's exactly what's happening. Mira whispered. You just felt that? Clara nodded. It's not broken. It's scared. They stared at her in stunned silence. The rest of the week, Clara worked side by side with the 2 scientists, communicating in sketches, murmured observations, and gut feelings that often led to breakthroughs no algorithm could predict. They weren't just solving problems, they were redefining the relationship between technology and instinct. But word began to spread. Whispers reached the upper floors. Someone had been handpicked, bypassed protocol, given a seat without a title. And no one was angrier than Eli Brenner. He confronted Miles in the corridor. You're risking everything on her. I'm trusting everything to her, Miles replied. It's reckless. Miles turned. What's reckless is building a future without people who see it before the rest of us do. That night, Clara stayed late again. The lab was quiet. Oasis hummed softly, its internal systems finally syncing for the first time. But Clara wasn't thinking about the engine. She was thinking about what it meant to belong. In the garage, she had been invisible. Down there, she had learned the art of listening, because no one ever asked her to speak. Now her voice was changing things. As she prepared to leave, she found a small envelope taped to her locker. No name. Just one line inside. Watch your back. Some engines don't want to be fixed. Her breath caught. Not everyone wanted her to succeed, and some were about to prove just how far they'd go to make sure she didn't. The envelope burned in Clara's pocket the whole walk home. Every rustle of paper in the wind, every passing glance on the train felt louder now. She tried to shake the feeling, to convince herself it was just someone's idea of a joke. But her instincts, those quiet, steady senses she had trusted all her life, told her otherwise. Someone was watching, and someone didn't want her there. The next morning, Clara arrived at the East Annex before dawn. The sky outside was still dark, but her mind was already racing. She stepped into the lab to find Mira pacing, eyes glued to a data stream that looked like chaos to most but sang with pattern to Clara. We had a data breach, Mira said without turning. Last night, someone accessed the core simulation, logs, and left them scrambled. Clara walked to the terminal. Scrambled how? Intentionally corrupted. A very specific sabotage, Only the prediction parameters were touched. The rest was left untouched as if to avoid suspicion. Cade joined them, frowning. Someone doesn't just want this project to fail, they want it to look like you failed. Mira nodded. They left your badge ID on the activity log. Clara's heart dropped. But I wasn't even... No, Cade cut in. The server timestamps don't lie. You weren't even logged in. Someone cloned your ID. Miles stormed in moments later, anger hidden behind his calm tone. No press, no alerts, we'll handle this internally. He looked directly at Clara. Do you trust me? She hesitated, then nodded. Good. Then let's fix what they tried to break. They worked through the next 2 days like surgeons, in an emergency ward. Clara redrew every map from memory, rebuilt the system's trust functions, and helped rewrite the algorithm's foundation. They didn't just repair what was broken, they made it stronger. But behind every success, tension grew. The sabotage wasn't just technical, it was personal, a message. And Clara had a good idea who was behind it. She confronted Eli on the second floor late one evening. He was reviewing a set of proposals near the coffee bar, his jacket draped neatly over the back of a leather chair. You cloned my ID, Clara said, her voice calm but firm. He didn't look surprised. Prove it. I don't need to. You're predictable. You don't like people without titles walking into your world. But here I am. Eli finally looked up, his smile thin and sharp. You're a good mechanic. That doesn't make you an architect. Clara stepped closer. Sometimes, the person who's closest to the machine is the only one who sees when it's about to collapse. He rose slowly. And sometimes people like you don't understand how much is at stake. She didn't flinch. People like me are what's at stake. She walked away without another word. The next morning, a surprise review board was called. Eli had submitted a formal complaint about Clara's role in the project, questioning her qualifications, her access level, even her emotional judgment. The room was silent as Miles reviewed the documents. Then he spoke. Do you know how many systems failed under certified leadership? He asked. How many collapses came from people with 10 letters after their name? I'd rather trust someone who listens than someone who only defends their resume. He looked around. If any of you think Clara doesn't belong here, speak now. No one did. That afternoon, Clara received a new badge. Platinum border, full access, and this time, it had her title on it. Clara Hart Systems Architect, Oasis, but she didn't frame it. She didn't celebrate because that night, as she left the building, she found another note on her windshield. You were warned. We're not done. She tucked it into her jacket, unread by anyone else, and drove off into the dark. But something in her had shifted. Fear was still there, but no longer louder than her belief. She wasn't just fixing machines anymore. She was fixing what people thought was impossible. And someone out there was afraid of that. The first time she stood in front of the media, Clara's voice nearly caught in her throat. Cameras clicked. Lights flashed. A reporter asked about the engine specs, another about her education. But all Clara could hear was the sound of her own heartbeat. She looked over at Miles, who gave her a subtle nod, just enough to say, You earned this. Speak. So she did. I didn't build Oasis alone, she began, her voice quiet but unwavering. And I didn't come here to prove anything to those who already decided I wasn't enough. I came here because machines don't care about titles. They respond to patience, understanding, and respect. Maybe we should try that with people too. The room went silent, not because of what she said, but because of what she meant. That evening, the press exploded. Unknown mechanic becomes lead architect, one headline read. Another, Hard over hardware, how intuition beat the system. But inside the company, not everyone celebrated. Eli had gone quiet, but Clara wasn't naive. His silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. And he wasn't the only one watching her closely. One morning, an internal memo was leaked. It suggested Oasis posed unmeasured liability risks, that the system was too reliant on non-traditional protocols. Though it wasn't signed, Clara recognized the language. It was Eli's style, strategic doubt masked as concern. The board called a meeting. Clara was asked to defend Oasis not as an idea, but as a safe investment. She stood before a panel of stone-faced executives, most of whom still remembered her as the quiet girl in the garage. Oasis isn't perfect, she admitted. But neither is the world it's meant to help. Emergencies don't come with manuals. Lives can't wait for corporate permission slips. This system adapts because it was designed by people who've had to adapt their entire lives. We didn't build it to fit tradition. We built it to fit reality, someone on the board asked. And if it fails? Clara met his gaze. Then we rebuild. But this time, with more people like me in the room. A pause. Then, slow applause from the chairman at the end of the table. Approval was granted. But Clara didn't get a chance to breathe before the next threat hit. And this time, it wasn't hidden in emails or hallway glances. It came in the form of a system failure. Live. The first field test of Oasis was scheduled. In a simulated disaster zone. A replica of a collapsed metro tunnel, with mock casualties and blocked routes. The goal? Test if Oasis could power a rescue drone fleet and autonomous support units without human command. All systems were green. The countdown began, and then everything crashed. The lights flickered. The drones stalled. The control feed went black. Panic moved through the tech team like static. A mission meant to showcase a revolution now looked like a disaster. Clara dove into the diagnostics. Her fingers flew over keys, her ears filtering out panic. Mira was already checking power redundancies. Cade was scanning for code interference, and then Clara saw it, buried deep. A recursive loop, manually inserted, masked in legacy code. It wasn't a bug. It was sabotage. She turned to Miles, breathless. They embedded it during last week's network patch. It was programmed to crash under public broadcast. Can you fix it? He asked. I can isolate it. And if you can't in time? She didn't blink. Then I'll shut it all down myself. With the room watching, Clara disconnected from the main terminal and plugged directly into the engine's manual core interface. She bypassed the AI layers, pulling power straight from the system's heart. And then she did something no one expected. She spoke to it, not in words, but in pressure, in pulse, in sequence, like a heartbeat matching another. The system stuttered, then stabilized. Drones rose again, lights surged back, and the field test completed successfully, just 3 minutes behind schedule. The engineers erupted in cheers, but Clara wasn't smiling. She knew this wasn't the end, because the deeper she stepped into the light, the more shadows she uncovered. And someone was still hiding in them. It wasn't victory she felt, it was weight, the kind that sits on your shoulders after everyone else has clapped and left the room, after the drones flew, after the headlines praised her, after the systems came back online and the world decided just for a moment that she was a hero. But she knew better. You don't change a system by winning once. You change it by refusing to leave. 2 days after the test, a message arrived, not anonymous, not subtle. It was a letter from the CEO himself, Alexander Reeves, the real one. Not the polished press version, but the man she hadn't seen since that quiet morning in the garage when everything began. Come to the top floor. Today. No agenda. Just you and me. No title. No assistant. Just that. She rode the elevator in silence. No clipboard in hand. No proof to bring. Just a worn mechanic's badge still clipped to her belt and a resolve that no longer needed defending. When the doors opened, Alexander was already standing, looking out across the city like he was trying to remember it. I owe you an apology, he said before she could speak. Clara raised an eyebrow. For what? For not seeing you sooner, and for letting people like Eli keep people like you in the shadows. She stayed quiet, letting the silence ask the questions she didn't need to. He turned. You built something bigger than any blueprint. You taught this company how to listen. I want you to stay. But not in the garage. Her eyes narrowed. You want me to run it? He shook his head. No, I want you to rebuild it. From the inside. Clara leaned forward. You mean lead the new department? I mean lead the future of this company, he replied. Create the next generation of builders, mechanics, dreamers, people who don't fit the mold. She stared at him, and for a second every late night, every ignored suggestion, every whispered judgment echoed behind her. Then she nodded. But I do it my way. Alexander smiled. That's the only way it works. Word spread quickly, not about the meeting, but about what happened after. Clara didn't move into a glass office. She turned the old garage into a lab. She installed couches where tools used to hang, whiteboards where oil stains marked the floor. She opened the doors to students who'd never set foot in a university. She let voices into the conversation who were always told to speak later, speak less, or not at all. And slowly, people noticed. The ones no one picked for promotions. The ones passed over in every meeting. The ones who fixed things quietly, only to be forgotten. They started showing up. Clara taught them to listen, just like she'd once listened. To an engine's failing rhythm, and heard a second chance inside it. Years passed. And then one afternoon a young woman entered the garage, nervous, hesitant, with grease on her cheek and too many questions in her eyes. Clara saw herself in her instantly. The girl whispered, I don't have a degree, but I love machines. Clara smiled gently and handed her a wrench. Good. They've been waiting for someone like you. Outside, a bronze plaque hung quietly over the entrance. Clara Hart Innovation Garage. Where genius has no dress code, no title, and no expiration date. She never asked for recognition. She just made sure no one else had to wait as long to be seen, because Clara didn't change the world with noise. She did it the same way she fixed engines, softly, precisely, and exactly when it mattered most.